Now, South African Airways is back in business after almost 2 years of being grounded. This has been for some while now. The national carrier was out of the sky for 16 months before undergoing business rescue and avoiding liquidation. SA announced earlier this year, or just a couple of days ago actually, that it will fly to Sao Paulo 4 times a week, with 2 flights departing from Cape Town and 2 from Johannesburg. Some of those flights took off this week, and aviation analyst Guy Leach joins us for more on this. Thank you so much for your time, Guy. I'm sure you're very excited for this match tonight, so thanks for making time to speak to us. I think this is definitely a sign of resilience on the part of SA that they are now deciding to fly once again to Brazil. What do you make of this development?
Yeah, hi Heidi, nice to be with you, especially on such a big day.
Yeah.
But yeah, the SAA return to Brazil is important. I mean, there's no downplaying the fact that this is the first true intercontinental flight that it is, or route that it has opened up since the return to service, since the return from the business rescue precipice. So let's not downplay that for one moment. There are, however, a lot of concerns. Most specifically that it's only operating 2 flights a week from Joburg and 2 flights from Cape Town. In airline knowledge or terms, that's not sufficient to own a route. You know, you've got to literally fly every day if you're going to control the route, if you're going to be available, because people want to fly when they want to fly. 2 flights a week, or a total of 4 flights a week, is going to be a problem for SAA. And I think the reason we're seeing this low level of initial getting back into the route is simply because SAA doesn't have the fleet. They've only really got one viable long-haul aircraft, an Airbus A330. They've also got an old, very old-fashioned 4-engined Airbus A340, which they use for things like Cuban flights as a standby, but it's not really enough. So the airline needs to be desperate to get more aircraft into the fleet. I think it's significant that it has chosen Sao Paulo as the first intercontinental route, because it does pretty much have that route to itself. I asked Professor Lamola recently what route after Sao Paulo, and he really hasn't been able to say. He just says they haven't decided yet. And I think the reason for that is because they have very few other options which they can expand to as well.
Absolutely, and I actually want to speak about, I mean, you speak about the aircraft that's not really available to SAA, and this was, of course, one of their biggest challenges. I'm wondering where they are getting this money to fly, because it's obviously not cheap, and whether or not there's actually demand for this. I'm sure they've done their work, and having engaged with the Minister of Public Enterprises at that relaunch, as well as the interim CEO, they are very confident, and they are very confident in terms of saying we're not going to repeat the same mistakes. Do you think that it is financially viable to be flying this route once again, and where they are actually getting the money to do this?
At this stage, they haven't asked the taxpayer, the government, for more funds. They had a couple of early wins with so-called low-hanging fruit, specifically in terms of their ability to recover the so-called blocked funds that were owed to them from countries like Angola, Zimbabwe, and Nigeria. That really gave them a boost to their cash flow. And to give SAA credit, they have been very steady, very measured in the way they've got back into service. So they haven't suddenly sort of overreached themselves by trying to fly to 50 different destinations. So they may well be running cash positive. Look, the signs aren't all good. We did see a report to Parliament 2 months ago where they indicated they'd lost 50 million rand, 150 million rand over 3 months, 50 million rand a month. But 3 months is not enough to really judge. So we need to see audited results sooner rather than later. And unfortunately, we still haven't seen audited results from 2018, probably because of that old bugbear that the airline is still not properly a going concern. And that's why I think that you mentioned you might want to talk about the Takatso Consortium. We await with bated breath to see whether the Takatso Consortium deal is ever going to happen. It is supposed to inject another 3 billion rands worth of operating capital. Personally, I'm skeptical.
Let's actually just go a little bit deeper into that matter, Guy, because when we asked the minister on Thursday about what is actually going on with Takatso, because we know it went to the competition tribunal that's given the green light in terms of Takatso being the preferred strategic equity partner, but the minister seemed rather I don't want to use the word worried, but I mean, he did acknowledge the fact that there are still some issues that need to be sorted out, and they are trying their very best to sort it out. But when it comes to legalities, they have to make sure that they have everything in order and all their ducks in a row. What do you make of Takatso? Do you actually think that they will become the SEP?
Yeah, the minister is correct to be a little hummy and hawey, or a bit non-committal about whether they can actually get it right. Because as I've said a number of times, my view is that the time framework that he's now offering, which is late this year or early next year for the finalization of the deal, is quite frankly just unrealistic, to be polite about it. By my reckoning, and I've taken expert legal opinion on this, SAA has to get it's the act of parliament which creates it change to allow a private sector partner in it. The act provides only for a single owner, and that's the state. It has to change its air licenses, air services licenses, and it has to change its aircraft operating certificate. All of those would normally take a year to 18 months. So quite frankly, I think that just in terms of time requirements, it'll be a miracle if they get the Takatso Consortium deal done and dusted by the end of next year, by the end of 2024. And then, of course, there's the will to do the deal. I'm not convinced that Pravin Gordhan really has the required will to do the deal. I think it goes against ANC government policy to sell off major state-owned assets like this. And I think that there's a potential huge problem in having to get rid of the the minority shareholders, because they will want an enormous payout, possibly in the region of 600 million rand, to make them go away quietly. So I think that there are enormous obstacles, and I personally am very skeptical about the Takatso deal actually happening.
What does that mean, though, for the future of SAA if this Takatso deal does not happen, Guy? Because the department has really sold this deal as being the golden ticket for SAA to survive.
It is indeed. The airline is currently badly undercapitalized, and for all we know, is running at a cash negative. In fact, I suspect it is running cash negative at the moment, and it's beginning to show signs of bowing to political pressure by making poor moves. For instance, the recent addition of Abidjan to its West African network is a very worrying move. That's pure political flag carrying in terms of its so-called role as a flag carrier, which is an obsolete concept. So it'll never make money on the Abidjan route. And if it continues on this sort of line, it's never going to make money at all. And that's, again, further concern for us as the voters, as taxpayers, that it will need to come to us for money sooner rather than later, as I've said. And we started off this discussion by talking about the fleet. It's going to need new aircraft, new long-haul aircraft, if it continues to expand. And my expectation is that the next route will probably be to Perth. It doesn't have the aircraft to service that. And a new airliner costs 5 billion rand each these days. It's going to have to come to the government to get at least guarantees for those sort of aircraft. I think the government was hoping it could go to Takatso and maybe the PIC to get those sort of guarantees. As I said, my view is that's unlikely to happen. So I think that we as the taxpayers are going to sooner find ourselves back in the bad old days of having to, if not bail out SAA, then at least give it huge support.
Oh, goodness me. Not again, Guy. But thank you so much for your insights.
Sorry to give you bad news. I only hope the Boks win tonight and solve all our problems.
Absolutely. We really have a lot of trust in them. Thank you so much for that insight. We do appreciate it. That was aviation analyst Guy Leach.